Let them remake Doom, or fire them. If there was ever a sentence I didn't want to read before going into a game, this is probably up there. After the turn of the millennium, ID Software were a significantly different company than they were in games past. John Romero had left ID after Quake 1's release following a lot of internal disagreements that honestly have a lot of conflicting reports about just why this happened when looking back on it nowadays. From accusations of laziness and just playing deathmatch with the community all the time, to a belief of a condemning culture wherein if you were seen as no longer needed, ID would just force you out. John Romero, a major and significant individual within the company, had been long gone by now to chase this dystopian world of Deus Ex, another franchise I'd love to look into one day. But back to the topic at hand. John Carmack, the other John of ID's past, whom of which I've even praised, wanted to completely remake Doom from the ground up on their, at the time, brand new engine, the ID Tech 4. Boasting an immersive and innovative per-pixel lighting system that, jump the gun a little, Doom 3 never shies away from to make some genuinely impressive environments on a visual standpoint, with new sounds and animations available through the engine as well, and a lot of new tricks on making shadows. I can understand wanting to make a new Doom with the engine, but I'm not sure this remake, for the sake of remaking, was exactly what it should have been used for. I mean, heck, the game is called Doom 3, but it has very little to do with anything that came before outside of sharing some demon names. My feelings on it were also shared by ID's owners at the time, Kevin Cloud and Adrian Carmack, no relation to John Carmack by the way. Both initially refused John Carmack's proposal of a Doom remake and didn't like John Carmack's want for ID to keep remaking what came before. They were only pulled over after the success of Return to Castle Wolfenstein, a remake of the original Wolfenstein. And that very sentence I started this video on. Artist Paul Steed was fired in retaliation of that statement before eventually the owners bent the knee and John Carmack's current dream came to life. Doom 3 eventually released on August 3rd, 2004, considered a great innovative success with many praising its lighting, animation and shadows that John Carmack had taken pride in with the engine. The game was seen as the next big step for the genre and the reinvention of the wheel people had been clamoring for. However, this didn't last. In November of the same year, Half-Life 2 came out, a physics-based first-person shooter with a sprawling campaign, inspired original story, far more expansive levels, with various different ways to explore them, and on an engine, the Source engine, that could simply just do what ID Tech 4 could not. Doom 3 went from the king to the clown almost overnight, and Half-Life 2 completely dominated in its place. Doom 3 is nowadays considered the black sheep of this franchise, the oddball there to be skipped after Doom 2 or 64, instead picking back up from when the franchise reclaimed its footing in 2016, a whole 12 years after this unique take on the series. But as tempting as that might be, I won't be doing that. A later revision of the game called the BFG edition is what I played for this review, so understand certain aspects of the games have changed in this version that were not like this in the original. Additionally, I plan to cover both Doom 3 and its expansion, Resurrection of Evil. The expansion will be a separate video because there's already a heaping load of things to talk about here. So enough prefacing, let's dive into Doom 3.
The Union Aerospace Corporation is the largest corporate entity in existence. Originally focused on weapon and defense contracts, new ventures have expanded into biological research, space exploration, and other scientific endeavors. With unlimited funds and the ability to engage in research outside of moral and legal obligations, the UAC controls the most advanced technology ever conceived.
Yeah, just in case you wasn't sure just how different this Doom game was going to be, it opens with world building. The demons haven't invaded, but you know something is sinister about the UAC off the bat. The UAC being a familiar research group to anyone who paid attention in the original games. Once boots are on the ground, there's several people that our new Doom guy can just interact with, which, yet, NPCs! It sounds silly, but this is a huge shift for the franchise about chaotic bloodshed of the damned. You're not some psycho out for revenge for his bunny rabbit. You're effectively a US Space Marine here in Mars City. Something cool though is that screens are entirely interactive in real time. No menu cuts, no zoom in disguising a load, you just walk up and press them. I mentioned Deus Ex during the intro, but I didn't realize this game actually beat Human Revolution to this idea, so kudos to you, Carmack. After getting a feel for the controls and the first real idea of how the pacing of this game is going to be, which is slow and atmospheric, we're kinda clotheslined immediately out of the dark and broody atmosphere by the most immediately identifiable bad guy I've seen and heard in a while.
The board authorized you? The board doesn't know the first thing about science. All they want is something to make them more money, some product. Don't worry, they'll get their product.
After how many accidents? Tell me, Dr. Betruger, why are so many workers spooked, complaining, requesting transfers off Mars?
They simply can't handle life here. They're exhausted and overworked. If I had a larger, more competent staff and bigger budget, even these few accidents could have been avoided.
It's like going out of a horror film into a cartoon with the level of, oh hey, I think he's the evil guy, this scene alone protrudes. Anyway, someone from the science team has gone missing. We're tasked with looking for him and bringing him back when found. Sounds simple enough of the beginning of our misadventure to kill Satan. After getting lost because there isn't a map button, and this game has that early 2000s PC ambition in its blood, so there's an incentive to talk to just about everyone you come across to see what you end up with, I remember there's a little robot on the ground wanting me to follow it and get back on track. Yes, this was all an excuse to bring up a core gameplay difference from the originals to this. Although there's many things different that you can see on screen, a core feature just being absent is something I'd like to start on. There's no map button. Your PDA is cool looking and is tied to a lot of your progression since it literally replaces the coloured keys and skulls of yestergame, but it isn't a map. Following our little buddy ends our walk about in Mars City for now. There isn't a traditional E1M1 style to the levels in this. We're past that, I suppose. Instead, each level is just what the area is usually, followed by a subtitle so you have an idea if this is technically a new level or not. So no at Doom's Gate or Perfect Hatred here. Instead, we started in Mars City and now we're underground Mars City. Underground gets us our armor and starting pistol, letting you feel for yourself what it's like to no longer have center gun position. Look, I get it doesn't make sense to have the shotguns literally come out of your chest, but damn it, I find it way easier to aim when I just have the whole gun I can line up threats with as opposed to just a dot on the screen. Your guns all sit on the right hand and you can't change that outside of mods, so get used to it. Speaking of getting used to things, hello Darkness, my old friend. I mentioned before that I was playing the BFG edition of Doom 3 and not the original. Well, in the original, the flashlight was a separate item that if used, stopped you from being able to use your weapons, meaning if you wanted to see anything in the darkness, you had to make yourself unable to attack. It was presumably used to add to the horror elements that the game leans more into, but I can also totally understand changing it in later versions because this game gets hella dark, hella often, that the appeal of such a horror would likely lose its meaning not too far into this game. That said, however, when I first told my friends I was playing BFG and not the original, a few told me the restrictive experience of the original was better for the game and its pacing. Maybe one day I'll hunt down an original copy of Doom 3 and find out for myself. It doesn't take long for us to find Mr. Science Man, and he's freaking out about the very thing we knew was coming before we even brought the game. The portal to hell is open, and we're too late.
The devil is real. I know. I built his cave.
I'm getting abnormal reading.
Okay, real talk, regardless of what I may say about this game after this point, I want it on record that that's one of the coolest lines I've ever heard. The demons are here, however. The coolest scientist will eventually turn into a basic zombie out to smack us if he gets close, and the new look of the soldiers will break in to say hi shortly after. A nice sudden burst of what's to come, even if the pistol kinda sucked. Well, I mean, what's fucking new? It also might make you realize that you're reloading as well. In a Doom game. Yeah, we're certainly not in the 90s anymore. Reloading in Doom honestly feels cursed to me. Like, obviously, you pump the shotgun and reload the super shotgun, etc. But that's an animation. The games would only tell you what ammo you have total. The animation was just a small delay between shots. But this, actually having to stop to reload, it's just... it doesn't feel right. I felt it the most only a little later when I did find our trusty boomstick, just for it to feel slower and less impactful. Broken up by having to duck into cover to press square so that our marine would start loading up the shotgun for the next burst of troubleshooting. Along the way we get reunited with our favourite fireball throwers, the imps, and oh my god, what did they do to my boy? The imps look hideous. What's with all the eyes? I genuinely thought this was a whole new enemy at first glance. It was only when their hands light the glow with the light of the impending fireball that it dawned on me that this was indeed our imps. We battle back into the main core of Mars City, pick up an assault rifle along the way, and get sent off by our commander to head off to the Alpha Labs to join another squad. This is Doom, so you already know how this will go. But for the opening level and set dresser of what's to come, I think it does a good job showing you what to expect from this game. The problem is that the game is very heavy-handed with how it wants you to play this new version. When the basic enemies sometimes just survive 3 shotgun shells, then you need to hide to reload for a second. When guns take a second longer than you'd like to swap between in a pinch. When the imps just keep surviving everything, eventually you have to accept a more survivalist approach. But if that was the case, I wish they fully committed. I never felt short on ammo, and just like classic Doom, the pistol is replaced and forgotten about almost immediately. I feel this would have been better if they actually took some cues from survival horror games and made ammo an extremely limited resource. Imagine how powerful a shotgun would feel when you know you'll only be using it in a pinch as opposed to all the time as it currently is. I'm all for taking new risks and directions in a franchise, especially one that was seen as burning out during the time, which is funny to look back on considering the current resurgence of Doom and Quake-styled games nowadays with Dusk and Proteus, Ultra Kill and Turbo Overkill, Bolt Gun and so on. But if you're gonna take big risks like this, I feel they should have committed more than just what we got here. Maybe I should play the original version of Doom 3 where you can't have both a flashlight and gun out at the same time. Might have pulled me more into the experience that they were seemingly aiming for here. Anyway, off to the Alpha Labs. To get there, we need to cut through the administration area and... what the fuck?
Dr. Betruger.
No, I understand everything.
I'm telling you now, Doctor, the UAC is taking over this operation.
Operation? Is that what you're calling it?
The situation is out of control.
It's not out of control, Swan. You are. I'll manage this, and you and your flunky will be taking control of nothing. Do you understand?
Yes, Betruger. I think I do understand.
Okay, plan B.
Administration is an alright in-between level that teaches us how important the PDA will actually be. I mentioned before how it replaces keys from the older games, and here is when you'll really start to see that. Set doors can't be opened until you pick up the ID of someone with a high enough clearance level. Once you have it, any door is yours to investigate up until you find the next level of clearance up from it. I actually kind of prefer this. You don't lose the key or anything like that between levels, making it feel more like a permanent upgrade. Plus, the exploring can lead you to picking up grenades, taking a cue from Quake 2, I see. We also get our new pinkies too here, which are now part mechanical? I know Cyberdad was always the odd one for being mechanical, but pinkies aren't exactly what I thought needed a cyber makeover. Thankfully, you get the trusty chain gun, their biggest weakness at this point, soon after from a locker that legit requires you to check a real website back in the day to get, but now is found on a stray ID nearby. Thanks, Martian buddy. Now to the Alpha Labs, but for real this time.
Bravo team. Need to pick up the pace. Can't wait for you. Reaching the communication.
Alpha Labs has... alright, another imp at the door apparently, okay. Alpha Labs has you in total darkness to start with, making you have to be more aware of your corners and more focused on what you can hear. Credit where it's due again, Doom 3 has pretty consistent sound design that allows you to rely on your ears more than your eyes to figure out where the threats lie. Accompanied by a complete lack of music for significant chunks of the adventure, those demonic sounds will sometimes just give you more information than your flashlight ever could, especially when you get random red screens every now and then trying to infer the demonic influence is getting to you, or at least the city. It reminds me of the Cortana bits in Halo 3, the way it kind of just holds you in a space for a while to do its thing. We also get, hold, an entirely unique new enemy exclusive to Doom 3! Yay! There's actually a few new faces here instead of just cursed recreations of old ones. The maggots, as they're called, meet us not too far into the labs, and they're basically just the old pinkies in style. Not as big, but charge at you all the same. Somewhere in here is that Bravo team, but the Alpha Labs are divided into several sectors, and you already know the objective will end up in the last one. So through Sector 1 and 2 we go, into engineering just to eventually find Sector 3. Engineering at least has a cool section where you protect a scientist so you can light your way in the pitch black darkness around you, letting the game's genuinely impressive lighting and shadows take over, even if I don't really understand why your flashlight stops working when his lamp stops working. Like, are the lights soul bonded or something? What is this? Oh, Jesus Christ, why are there spider demons here? These are called Trites, another Doom 3 exclusive ugly. Hey. They kinda just melt at any weapon, but attack in packs, so can and will catch you during reloads if you're not careful. One shotgun blast will clear them out though. Once you finally get to Sector 3, you're still not immediately united with Bravo Team because there's a crane game in your way. You know, the perfect thing for a horror experience, time wasting. Nah, I'm kidding. Sector 3 isn't just a crane game, it's the place you'd first get the chain gun if you didn't have a Martian buddy, which leads to an actually appreciated trap that kinda reminds me of those fake end rooms from classic Doom, so it felt like a nice homage. With the chain gun, the game feels you're prepared enough to put you through a gauntlet, which thanks to the small rooms was actually relatively threatening, especially when the Pinkies joined in on the fun and gave me the full Pitbull experience. Turns out though, beyond this is a Sector 4. You can just decide to kill this random scientist for some reason when you get there. It means absolutely nothing if you spare or kill him, by the way. It's just there as a funny, oops, I killed an innocent man in my demon slaying game by clicking the giant button too fast instead of the much smaller spare button underneath it, but was at least worth highlighting a little, I felt. Continuing on, Okay, what's the deal with the imps jumping me at the doors, game? Is it supposed to be a spooky jump scare? Because it sucks. It's annoying, it's damage that's near impossible to avoid unless you can see the future and back up the nanosecond the door starts to open. It isn't scary, which I think was the intention, and it gets old real quick. Continuing on, we are met with a divergence of our otherwise entirely linear journey. A choice between a quick but dangerous path or a safer but darker path. I played Doom for violence, so danger it was, but I did appreciate the option even if only basic. Yeah, good luck figuring that one over there, Trite. I'm safe over here. Whoa, what the fuck? Our first boss fight is here too, which I suppose makes sense, would be more spidery in design considering how many Trites are around in the labs already. The Vajari, I am so sorry if that's not how you pronounce your name, Spider Bro, being in such a small space actually helped add to the tension of the fight. Grenades will work wonders on it, but obviously you could find yourself in the blast zone if you're not careful, especially since it can pull you closer to it when it isn't throwing debris at you. Fun first boss all in all, even if it kinda just died when it was over. I guess I've been spoiled by other games since I was expecting a little more song and dance before it dies, but no, it collapses like any other basic enemy. Once the fight is over, we're finally done with the Alpha Labs as Bravo Team has already left it. Off to the Enpro Facility we go.
Entry secure. Move in and take positions. Quiet. Did you hear that? This is Lee. Give me status. Always clear. There's nothing here, Sam. What the hell? Son of a bitch! Lead, I'm swinging around left.
Our boy the plasma rifle is back in this level. We just got to follow a little robot to start to find it. Similar to classic Doom, it's actually pretty damn reliable even if I'm not the biggest fan of the new look. I missed a big cube on the end of it, but I know it'll be a while before I get that back since the next game also uses this design. So far, although slower paced and obviously longer, the structure of steadily introducing new threats and then giving you new tools to deal with them as time goes on is just as present here as it was in the past. I mean, just after our plasma gun, we're met with lost souls who die in one hit from the plasma rifle, which you're absolutely gonna use because you just got it. So they don't get the best introduction here, unfortunately. They weren't great before, but they're kind of wasted here. Despite being a smidge more interesting, the Wraith enemies also introduced here don't get any introductions. Except they do get introductions, but only later on after you've already fought a handful of them? Although they can only melee like several other enemies, they at least teleport around if you don't deal with them immediately. Eh? Oh, come on, I'm trying here, guys. It's not my fault none of the new enemies are that interesting. I mean, did you even realize the zombies are new to Doom 3? I bet you didn't until I just said it. The usual basic enemies were soldiers and imps, but Doom 3 makes slow-walking generic mobs just out to slap you, and oddly enough, more enemies that you'd think can also fit into this category in some form or fashion. I wish I had more to say here, but Enpro, outside of the plasma rifle, is kind of forgettable, and more just there to set up our next destination. Bravo Squad is faring about as well as you'd expect, and we're off to the comm center to send an SOS or backup. Oh shit, a Gaka Demon! Anytime you're outside, you're put on the clock, as you have a limited amount of oxygen to reach the next airlock or door in general. It can be a little scary at first, but not as scary as this spooky scary skeleton randomly sliding across the floor. We also finally get our chainsaw here, and hot damn, this is legitimately the most satisfying chainsaw in the series so far. Why? Because it does great damage to literally anything you can reach and saves ammo. For a good stretch of the game onwards, any enemies on their own or only in small groups should absolutely be met with the saw. Oh, the Berserk power-up is here too. Oh, Doom 3, you spoil me. I don't get why you permanently scream the whole time you have it active though. Guess it's still trying to keep this silly power more horror-like in feel, but it kind of took me out of it more than anything. That said, like the chainsaw, it feels like it's much stronger than it used to be and absolutely worth using when you've got it. Upon finally sending that SOS, we're warned by that one bad guy evil scientist I pointed out at the start, who, by the way, has a marine with him holding a BFG, yay. He challenges us for sending that SOS and just straight up tells us he's off to Delta Labs to intercept and cut off our transmission, fearing doing so would lead the demons to Earth. Since our commander is also at the Delta Labs, we have our next destination. I'm aware of how formulaic I'm probably making all this sound, but this is kind of the game for the most part. Do something. Someone tells you something that leads you to the next area. Do something, you get the idea. To its credit, however, I was finding a rhythm with the adventure the more I went through it. The game kind of feels like it's inspired by the original Half-Life, with how many corridors and minor puzzles are scattered around as you unravel more of what's going on. Which, although isn't anywhere near as clean in execution as Half-Life was, it's still a good reference point that does offer this game some extra charms to it. The Bone Boys are back, and they don't look terrible. Ah, Revenants, I've missed you. Funnily enough, they're probably the most faithful to their original counterparts of any enemy in this game. Guess you really can't improve on perfection. The chainsaw deletes them a little too well, but I'm still just happy that a fun enemy came back and is still fun to fight. There's not too much to say about the first part of the monorail besides this. I mean, you do get the rocket launcher here near the end of it, which is always nice. Big Bad Scientist reveals he's the Big Bad Scientist around this time, I mean, go figure. It is an interesting change to have an on-screen villain as opposed to the older games just having the final boss be your villain that you only meet for the first time when you're fighting it. But just some scientist dude in this game about demons from hell does feel kind of basic. In the second section though, you get a bit of a double dip of new threats, one new, one familiar. I'll start with the latter. The Mancubus is honestly mostly the same as its original counterpart like the Revenants. The only real difference is that it seems to survive way more than they ever used to, making me resort to explosives from a safe distance half the time to do away with them. The other new enemy, that's brand new to Doom 3, are cherubs, literal demon babies. Similar to the spider enemies, they attack in packs but have little health, so I leaned on Old Reliable to comfortably clear them out.
Rise, rise, quas mir Yalofan. There is no death for you.
Site 2. Next stop, Delta Complex. Engineering, please report to Delta Complex Access Ramp. Track sensor failure detected.
You'd have thought that cutscene with the scientist would lead to an inevitable boss fight with that soldier soon, but that's not the case. This is just a regular new enemy that charges at you to slap you around. I mean, deja vu much? I mean, there is a sinister thought that if these specialized soldiers are just a regular enemy, then maybe the scientist has used and betrayed quite a number of Marines thus far, but I don't think that was what they were trying to convey here. It feels like this game has a trouble with each enemy fitting into a class. They're either ranged to charge at you with no other plan, or are a small enemy that groups up to attack you. From those classes, they just introduce stronger versions of them under the guise of a new enemy type that just hit harder, charge you quicker, or in a larger pack than before anyway. It made me care less and less about the new enemies the more I went on, because what's the point of caring when none of them feel actually new after a while? The reason I had such a love-hate relationship with the Archvile in Doom 2 was because of how genuinely unique of a threat it was in its ability to resurrect its fallen brethren. Don't get me wrong, the Archvile is in this game, we'll get to him, but it's still the only enemy that's got an identity on a gameplay level. They can look different all they want, but when they all fit into categories they share with too many other enemies, it just starts to get boring. Classing up enemies in a shooter isn't inherently a bad thing, I should stress. It's what can create a rhythm for players that keeps the game addictive and just fun in general. But the trick to these classes is to share a spine and not the muscle. Doom 3 does try this on occasion with Revenants, for example, having slower projectiles that home onto you that can be shot to make them explode early, but it isn't enough when it's a game of around 25 unique enemies, not including bosses. I'm trying my best not to compare it to Half-Life here, but it feels like that game was this game's biggest inspiration for design, but they just didn't quite grasp what made Half-Life 1 so magical to experience. All that said, the Delta Labs are actually pretty fun all in all. Big levels, key hunting, atmosphere. It feels like a classic Doom level brought far more gracefully than most of this style, and I can commend them for it. The opening sector has plenty of encounters, brings back the chain gun variant of the soldiers, so now there's finally a constant source of ammo for the thing. I was fitted out with a reasonable amount of rockets, and finding out the map is secretly one big circle after you get the key, clearance, you need, just made it all a really solid and fun level. I was having enough fun that I didn't even care that 2 doors just have imps behind them to jump you, just in case you forgot about that little trick. If you haven't noticed by the demonic interruptions starting to become more frequent, we're actually approaching hell now, which surprised me because I didn't realize we were far enough into this adventure to start our hell walking, but no, the game is spending Delta Labs' time as a prep for the bloodfest we know is coming. Backed up by a meeting, McCormick, a scientist who was involved in the situation, but also clues us into the game's unique and broken as shit special weapon, the Soul Cube. It'll be a while before we pick this baby up, so you can only admire it from a screen at current, but don't you worry, its time will come. Hang on a fucking minute, is that the BFG 9000? What's that doing in a room I already know the code for? Don't mind if I do. It's 931 for the door, by the way, so you can thank me later. The BFG actually works a tad different this time around though. You have to charge it up and manually release the shot firstly. Manual being the key word. If you don't let go of that button, the BFG would explode in your hand and kill you instantly. Secondly, starting with Quake 2, the actual shot of the BFG stopped just being a big explosion and instead became a slow-moving electric ball of death that has these tendrils coming out of it that latch onto any enemy it passes by after the trigger is pulled. Direct contact will still cause the explosion we all know and love, but firing it down a corridor now has its benefits of tagging several other demons along the way, all of which will feel the pain of these tendrils. Basically, the BFG went from a really big boom that might not always want to use due to the ammo, to a literal death machine now supported by its own ammo type instead of sharing it with the plasma rifle. Section 2 of the Delta Labs is actually so big they split it into 2 levels. I'm not kidding, you have 2A and 2B. The BFG is in 2A, and what they have waiting for you in 2B? Well, an Archvile, of course. The rocket-resistant, screen-nuking, demon-resurrecting terror that alongside the Super Shotgun single-handedly stopped me hating Doom 2 by being the most interesting threat from it, is now back in full fashion, and it literally stops you by the door out of the section to fuck you up and bring back the enemies behind you that you just took out. They have been nerfed a little though since the good old days. One BFG shot will just kill them at any point, and the fire they shoot no longer goes straight to your screen, but instead zips across the ground. But other than that, good to see you again, old buddy. Now die. Section 3 lays the gauntlet because it knows you have all the key weapons at this point, minus the super shotgun and the new toy. It knows you've dealt with most enemies, and it knows you can handle the darkness by this point. So the game basically says screw it and opens the door wide for a fair challenge to come through. A lot of trouble pausing constantly while you use teleporters to jump around the labs to find your path forward. You dictate where the portals go yourself, but this is never a problem as the options are usually warp somewhere else in the room or jump across the whole map, meaning you always know which one you're supposed to take. Sector 4 is... oh. Well, that's a bit more grim to say the least. Blood and bones all over the shop, some chainsaw-wielding maniacs that aren't me for a change walking around. Oh, and a direct portal to hell. Yeah, the scenery is making more sense now. We finally get our Hell Knights, which are introduced as a pair, making a nice reference back to the Barons of Hell fight from Doom 1. However, this is a Doom game and the Hell portal is right there. It's pretty clear what has to happen now. Landing in Hell and all of our equipment scattered, we're essentially pulling another Doom 1 reference by starting with nothing once more and having to build back up partway through. However, this is more just a reference and little more, as you'll get most of your equipment back pretty quickly. But that's all ignoring the elephant in the room, and that is that this is probably the most realized Hell in a Doom game so far, and it rules. If you're going to Hell in a horror game, you gotta do some abstract and otherworldly shit with it. You can't just make it broody with magma everywhere, and thankfully Doom 3 delivers. Tough encounters with limited equipment? Check. You have to fight a Hell Knight without a plasma rifle, rocket launcher, chain gun, or a BFG. If you're feeling brave, there's a chainsaw in the room with the Hell Knight, which, although it's fun to rise to that challenge, I wouldn't recommend it because you'll be running on low for the rest of the zone afterwards. Traps directly tied to getting stronger? Check. Pick up the chain gun at your own peril. Sick as hell skyboxes for, well, hell. Check, check. The abyss is staring back mightily hard. Claustrophobic corridors leading you into ambushes? Absolutely. Plus, you have unlimited sprint during this section and a berserk power-up later down the path. Hell rules! Hell is easily the best it's ever been, the most involved it's ever been, and the best level in Doom 3, easily. It's almost worth the price of admission for the rest of the game to experience this level. After all the other back and forths, the mazes without a map, the poorly handled enemies, and the cheap jump scare tricks, Hell would make you think it came from an entirely different game. I mean, yeah, it does start to get a little crazier as you go on with the amount of enemies they put in front of you at once, but I didn't care. I had the tools for the job being spoon-fed to me. I knew how to handle each threat. Why not put 3 Hell Knights in the room? Why not have a Mancubus on the other side of a door? The only thing that would have made this perfect for me would have honestly just been an aggressive background track. Something to get the blood pumping through the horror. But alas, outside of the game's main theme, Doom 3's soundtrack is completely comparable to Doom 64's in that it's all atmospheric noises. In fact, I'd say there's even less here than in 64, as I wasn't even aware anything resembling music was playing for the majority of the adventure. At the end of the chaotic road, we find the Soul Cube, protected by this giant creature simply known as the Guardian. The Guardian is technically a gimmick boss, but once you figure it out, the fight is over in less than a minute, so don't fret about it. The idea is, the boss is invincible normally until its 3 searchlight drone things are destroyed. When they're gone, it will start making more, but the Soul Cube will glow just above it. Hit the cube enough times and the Guardian will fall and the Soul Cube will be yours. Alongside it, we also reach the tragic end of our visit to Hell. We are pulled back to the real world, stripped of all of our equipment again, minus the cube, and set loose back in the Delta Labs to find the evil scientist now he's revealed he's always planned to let Hell take over Earth. Making me wonder why he didn't want us sending a distress signal earlier, but whatever, welcome back to Mars.
We are many. We are one. We are the Brainian Thor. You know us as the Soul Cube. Free us from our eternal prison, and we will help you. Vanquish our enemies, and we grow stronger. Listen for our call, and then free us to smite down the evil.
You are too late. Hell no longer needs that portal to enter this world. The invasion you saw was only the first wave. The Hellgate is capable of sending millions of my children into your world. Soon, the fleet from Earth will be here, and with their ships, we will bring this hell to Earth.
We return to the Delta Labs, now in Sector 5 with our new toy. We don't have our weapons, but once again the game is eager to correct that problem in time. But the Soul Cube, what does it do? Well, it deletes any enemy in the game, for you, without fail, for free. You just flick it out and oopsie daisy, the Archvile is dead. Once used, it has to recharge, but if you're thinking this is a long recharge, then you're mistaken. About 3 to 5 demon kills will do it. The game doesn't care what those demons are, by the way. Hell Knights or a Stray Spider, they both count equally. So rounding up smaller goons is now actually in your best interest to power up this death box quicker. When charged, the game will tell you even if it isn't equipped, so just keep fighting and know you have a weapon of mass destruction at the press of a button. Literally, it's the left on the D-pad. I decided not to separate the next few areas into individual chapters because returning to the Delta Labs, Central Processing, and then Site 3, all of them kinda come together to make the next cohesive chunk of the game. None of them are that big individually, but together they're about the length of the main Delta Labs we just did. Plus, there's another boss within it, so it just fits in my notes better. Healing is also fewer and further between now, so be prepared at all times, as if you come out of a fight too much worse off, you might not make it to the next stop regardless of your skill level. I do kinda wish, after that hell level, you got to keep the infinite sprint, but I suppose it was a balancing choice to not let you turn into a speed demon in this game. Which is ironic considering what the next mainline Doom title is, but we're not there yet, so hold your horses. In Central Processing, we can learn that the sergeant that had been instructing us for most of the game has been corrupted by Hell and is currently looking for us with our BFG. Considering there's 2 boss fights left in this game and by default one has to be the final boss, we kinda already know who our next boss is gonna be. But our next boss isn't the only thing here. Hell is breaching the base entirely. Lava pits are starting to show up, the game makes you do platforming for about 5 seconds, there's skulls everywhere, the works. It's actually a pretty cool build up to the end of the game here, now all has been said and done. They know you're ready to end this journey, so are building it up and up and up for as long as they can get away with. The door onwards is right at the start of the area, but there's always another key card we have to grab from elsewhere to open it. So what's one more walk, even if there's Archviles? We can take them, we have the Soul Cube. Once you're through, we gotta have a chat with our old boss. Our old sergeant has merged with what looks like a tank to become the Sabbath. With his own BFG to try and take you down, a challenging and interesting fight focused on shooting away the BFG shot when it's loose to make it detonate quicker so the tendrils don't catch you as much ensues, and it's immediately thrown under the bus because it dies to the Soul Cube as instantly as any other enemy. That's the boss fight, by the way, that's literally it! Just throw the box and you're done. You get your BFG back after this, but wow! What a waste! Beyond our former boss is Site 3, the last of our space station revisit roundup. Other than a few nice visual pieces and Hell Knights being regular enemies now, it's just a small middle piece to get you to the last section of the game, the caverns leading to the Hellgate. The caverns is the beginning of the end. 3 areas, the last being the final boss. We're done with dull metal corridors the game, we have our arsenal, we know the objectives, kill evil scientists and destroy the Hellgate, so we enter and see rusty dull metal corridors. I haven't spoken on it too much, but considering we're at the end of the game now, I think I might as well cover all my bases here. The level design is genuinely just bad, it's boring, repetitive, has too much back and forthing for keys, and despite being almost entirely linear, it's still sometimes confusing because of the lack of map or simple landmarks. The game sorely lacks in original areas and designs, to such an extent most levels blend into one another unless directly mentioned to be different. Hell was a fun level for being so unique for the game, but it's the only standout level I could think of after my playthrough ended. Heck, I complimented the Delta Labs earlier, but my enjoyment of that section came from the game just letting me get on with it instead of spoon-feeding me really slow and meek attempts at horror every 5 minutes. To reach the literal tunnel to hell, just for it to be even more boring corridors, finding the same IDs or keys to open the path on small side rooms, with no new enemies or weapons to speak of, I found the caverns to be mostly tiring despite not even being that long. In fact, that's something I can say about this whole game, it isn't that long. I reached the caverns on my first playthrough in around 5 hours, and I know I could have done it in less if I wasn't trying to enjoy everything I could with this game. I will compliment, however, that minus the odd ladder climb, you mostly head down during the cavern levels. Like you're entering the depths no man should venture near. The scenery gets more morbid over time, darker too, so I hope you like the flashlight because you're going to be using it a lot. The final area build-ups where you don't know exactly what's at the end of the tunnel are some of my favourite kinds of finales. Keeps the suspense going until the very last breath, and for something that's trying to be a horror game, what better way than to do this? By the time I finished the first area of the caverns though, I felt I was already ready for the final boss and it should have been next, but no, you're only halfway through the mess at this point. Well, I say that, but Caverns Part 2 isn't as long as the first. More just a gauntlet in the darkness, ending with a rematch with the Vagari, probably rather pissed off that I called it the Vajari earlier on. It was actually rather close too, not because the boss was hard, but because I had been so bullied by some of the Hell Knights in the rooms prior, so I had to do it near perfect just to survive. Whoops. When you get to the depths, you already know it's the final level of a Doom game. Gives you all the ammo in the world and every gun, just in case somehow you jumped over a gun on the corridors down to this point. It gives us a nice, long, empty hall to build up the final boss, to take down the evil scientist and shut down that Hellgate. It's been a hot minute to get here, but we're ready. We're some random marine who 5 hours ago just showed up on this Mars base. We can do anything. Bring it on, evil. Oh, that's here instead. The Cyber Demon is here, which was nice to see, even if he's seen better days to say the least. Unfortunately, his boss fight completely fucking sucks. The Cyber Demon only takes damage from the Soul Cube and can't shoot you across the Hell Portal in the middle. So guess what you do? You circle the arena, killing basic enemies without effort because the game just gave you max ammo for every weapon. Once the Soul Cube is full, throw it at the big boy. Rinse and repeat, it died on the 4th throw. But that's okay. You know why? Because it wasn't the evil scientist. He's still in here somewhere, so our final battle has only really just begun. Except we've just sealed the Hellgate, and a bunch of Marines just stormed in to save us. Okay. Well, at least we can soon fight the main villain the whole game has been teasing and leading up to, right? They fucking sequel bait the main villain of the whole game? What the actual shit is that? Why waste our time then? I mean, Dr. Petruga, to use his actual name instead of just Evil Scientist, is the final boss of the expansion, Resurrection of Evil, but I don't think he was originally going to be. I think they had every intention of having Doom 4 continue off of this, but after the game quickly fell out of the public interest due to just more interesting things coming out and the game itself just being okay outside of its lighting, we had an expansion to tie it together instead, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That's not for today, so let's wrap this up. Doom 3 is painfully okay for most of its runtime, and almost never gave me a moment that stood out as something worth remembering or enjoying across the just under 6 hours I spent with it. It rarely does anything that's particularly offensive, but it also doesn't push many boundaries, and tries a little too hard to just be a visual marvel instead of a fun video game. The game does have an impressive lighting and shadow engine that holds its own even to this day, but I really don't care when that's the only huge compliment I can give it. Nothing horrible, but outside of Hell, the shortest level in the game I might remind you, it never directly left an impact and unfortunately suffers a worse fate than just being bad. It's forgettable. We're not entirely done with this journey, however, so next we meet, we'll be tackling the actual ending of Doom 3's story, 2005's expansion, Resurrection of Evil. Thank you so much for watching. This video took some of my soul with it to make due to my indifference I had with some of it, but it was still an interesting piece of Doom's history, especially considering what Doom is nowadays. But we've still got one more thing before I can even think about that. Remember as always to like and subscribe, it genuinely goes a long way in helping my channel grow. Additionally, you can find my Twitter, Patreon and PayPal in the description of every video I post. I tried to stream around 5 days a week and would love to have you pay a visit if so inclined. But until next time, take care everyone, and have a happy Halloween!
Never conceals its desire to control the heavens, and I'm no exception.